Yeah, thank you so much once again, Karibuni Sana. Welcome. My name is Harun Hassan, the current Executive Director, National Council for Persons with Disabilities. The Council is a state agency mandated to promote issues of human rights of persons with disabilities in Kenya. And we are almost 20 years old. And my conversation with election is in context of disabilities. And I'm a CEO of the council for almost now 2 years. And this year we have been very much active in elections. And again, more so, particularly how persons with disabilities can be actively involved in elections in Kenya. There are about 1 million persons with disabilities in Kenya. Even though that number is conflicted, that we have to use the World Health Organization estimate of about 5 million, 5 to 6 million. And disability in this country, just like any other developing nations, is on rise. Those that used to be there through medical are going down because of advances in science. Now, a number of children are not getting blind because there's vaccine. A number of children are not becoming now paralyzed because of polio, because there's vaccine. But there are other factors that are making the numbers to go up. One of them is road accident. Like myself, I find myself on a wheelchair because of road accident. Then there are cases like, lifestyle diseases, hypertension, blood pressure. A number of people are becoming paralyzed, losing speech, diabetes. But more other in the context of elections, conflicts also. For example, if conflicts happen, whether it is as a result of election, whether it is as a result of other factors, what always we are told is death, displacement, and destruction. But no one tells us how many people along the line become disabled. And also how those with disabilities are again disproportionately again affected within those kind of situation or that kind of station. So all these factors contribute to the number of disabilities across the world. In the world, it's estimated more than 1 billion persons are persons with disabilities, different forms of disabilities. And the world over, disability is becoming part of human diversity. And disability are seen more as not someone with an impairment, but the barriers across these people or these persons with different impairments so that they can freely, productively participate in the society. The barriers are in form of different disabilities or impairment interact with different barriers differently. For example, if someone is blind or if someone is deaf, it's more of a communication barrier. If someone is a wheelchair user like me, it's more of a physical built environment. But all forms of disabilities, they have one barrier which we have in common, attitudinal barrier. The barriers of the society or communities we live. How do they look at the persons with disability? This is the biggest of the all barriers, to make them give a chance, opportunities, and to be seen as, just as part of other members of the society. So that is a disability. I think in elections, it's very much important. Kenya, we have great laws that put persons with disabilities right explicitly, very well. The Constitution of Kenya, we pride ourselves as the most progressive. Article 54, particularly in the Bill of the Right, the emphasis is on the right of the persons with disability. As a right as a person and as a right again as a persons with disabilities, including even how sign language, for example, is a national language. So the Constitution also go further deeper and give political right, economic right, and social right. In the political right, how do persons with disability be allowed to participate in elections, in political processes, to sit on a table where people make a decision? Sometimes if you are not where people make a decision and they make a decision for you, the chances are they make a wrong decision for you. So the political right is in the context of how persons with disability have given space, as a voter and also as a candidate, with disabilities, and what are, the challenges they encounter in all those processes. And it is in that context that you see Kenyan Parliament, whether it is Senate, whether it is National Assembly, they must, I think it's sharp, that they are nominated, persons with disabilities in the Senate and also in the National Assembly of any gender. And in the counties also, even though we have issues with the counties assemblies also must, not really must, because that's why we don't have more than 20 county assemblies with no persons with disabilities representing them. But the intent is they should be there. So that allows now greater emphasis, greater awareness among persons with disabilities. And the laws of Kenya, the Constitution of Kenya, also under Article 26, the treaties, conventions on human rights are part of laws of Kenya. So UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability now become part of laws of Kenya. And in that, it emphasizes on the right of the person and the well-being in the community where they live and the country where they live. So all these actually put, some kind of awareness. And the Disabled Persons Organization and the leadership in this country are so much aware of all this, and you find robust, participation and engagement, But having said all those, as a developing country, we too have our own fair share of challenges insofar as elections and persons with disabilities, are concerned. And as a council, this year, this is the concluded election, we made a deliberate attempt to work with all the stakeholders around elections. And the stakeholders include IEBC, Office of Registrar of Political Parties, observers of elections, commissions like NCIC and other human rights commissions in the country, with, of course, emphasis around disabilities. And in each stakeholder, we have a particular agenda to push. For example, on Office of Registrar of Political Parties, our emphasis is, do political party conform with inclusion? Have they mainstream disability in their political governance structure? And we advocated to them that if it doesn't, then they should not be cleared, to participate in the election. That's why we find in concluded general election, almost all major political parties, they had, disability wing. You hear of ODM disability wing, you hear of Jubilee, you hear of UDA, and then also, the front runners or the main candidates through that link engaging with persons with disabilities so that they can hear their views and incorporate them into their manifestos and how they can address that. IBC, actually, our big interest was on civic education particularly. Are we engaging in a format that is accessible, that resonate with that persons with disabilities and the challenges for them to vote as a voter? What are the natures of the polling stations? Is it accessible to people who have mobility impairment? Are ballots, accessible to those who are blind? Is it braille, for example? I know it wasn't. Those are the conversations that we had with IEBCs and other, including when they come and vote, for example, are they given preferences, kind of an affirmative that you make them to jump the queue because of the nature of their disability? Are they having those kind of consideration? Are polling station accessible also? Those are the engagement, that we had with the IEBC. Are their officers, fully sensitized on how to deal or how to engage voters, with disabilities? Yeah, I think I'm now someone with disability exactly 15 years in March next year. I will be exactly 15 years on a wheelchair. I was driving home, with a friend, and we are on a rough road and fairly speeding. And I was the one actually who was driving. Then the front tire of our car, busted. And then whatever I'm sharing is what I was told. And I was told maybe I've applied an emergency brake, and then the car started rolling. Because I was not on a seat belt, maybe then I was thrown out. So I had a lot of injuries, head injuries, multiple injuries, but one injury made me to sit on a wheelchair, back injury. I suffered spinal cord injury. I spent in hospital for a year, and coincidentally, that was the year Kenya was going to election again, 2007, the most very unpopular election in Kenyan history. That period I was in bed, in hospital bed. I had my own version of post-election violence, literally trying to come to terms with what has happened to me. So I spent 1 year in hospital, 1 year in our rural home, contemplating, let me say, the worst. But one thing picked me up. I had a strong family, actually, very, very strong family, and some few of very strong friends who were very supportive. But one thing picked me up and made me to sit this office today where among the people who come and visit me are persons with disabilities. Not because I'm someone with disability, I'm a sick man in the village, and it is their responsibility to come and visit me. Because they were visiting me, and I've internalized now that I'm someone with disability and I will never walk again, I started imagining what life could be to be someone with disability in pastoral communities where I grew up in northern Kenya. People who are always on move, in search of water, pasture. What's life like? So the more I started thinking about that, and the more I started integrating that into my mind, it served as a therapy for me. And I find myself extensively reading and participating, now slowly but slowly in issues with disability. That time I was serving as a public administrator with the government. So I find myself shifting my focus now, from there, trying to understand what is disability, whether it is theologically definition, how are the management of disability, in Kenyan society and communities, whether it's in governance, whether it is, in whatever front. So slowly by slowly, I find myself, let me say, quote unquote, expert around disabilities, writing stories on disabilities, contributing opinions in Kenyan local dailies, speaking around it, and forming organizations with disabled persons. And then I ended up, in the National Council where now we are pushing the agenda of disability, in government programs and the services. So very briefly, that's how I find myself on a wheelchair and become someone with disability. That actually it gave me some sense of appreciation that anything can happen, that we should be always prepared. When I was living on the other side, I had no idea what disability is all about. And because I was part of those society and I never thought it will happen to me, it never featured in my plans. So I was the one I was literally when the society label, stigma, stereotype, I understand because I was there. And then the painful process of accepting the condition. And then when the acceptance came, you came now, to a real issues, the real challenge, facing the barriers, attitude, how the society, you're right in it. So somehow I felt I'm right in the middle. I was on the other side, on that side, and I felt I have some balanced kind of knowledge to inform, the programs that we're pushing, and that makes us that it's not really what happened to us, but how we confront what happened to us that matters, and how we see ourselves. That's the most important thing. That's why this issue of election particularly is so concerned to us. Kenyan elections are very sensitive, so much polarizing in nature, sometimes not issue based, sometimes, clan based. So communities with disability, we get scared. As persons with disabilities, interventions, maybe humanitarian agency, or emergencies, there's no clear mainstreaming in it. So even with those with disability are scared. They have the fears, and then the conflict or the atrocities or the wars, if it happens, it makes a number of us also persons with disabilities. And are we prepared to receive a number of us who have become disabled? Where we are the society. So as organizations, sometimes we also empower disabled persons organization to add their voice on such discourses, to bring people who become disabled during conflicts, during times of elections, to tell their stories, to inspire others that if you take this route, we'll end up this way. And if we end up this way, what does it mean to the labor force of this country? What does it mean general economic or productivity of this nation? So we say we should angle our conversation along. I won't say adequately, but we are somehow represented. And gradually we're reaching the 20 years ago, issue of disability we don't discuss openly like we're doing now. 20 years ago. Right now we are there. We feature in most important conversations, including employment, including appointment, whether it is political space. So the sensitivities, as they say, Rome was not built in a day. So the journey is on. But one day we'll reach there. So I think we might not be there, but there are some efforts that can be seen and that have been demonstrated. For example, here as a government agencies, government offices report to us, ministries, departments, and agencies, to what extent have they complied with the requirement of the law insofar as disability mainstreaming is concerned. And then we publish reports. That reports now enable us. Where are we last year? What was the issue? What are the lessons that we've learned? In all aspects, whether it's employment, whether it's built environment, whether it is, services generally in the country, how far have we, mainstream, the issues of disability. So some fairly, I think I can say, though we are not there, of course, no one has been there. However developed we are, but we are hitting the right direction. Before elections, the concerns are, will election happen peacefully? Will I be safe if I go to polling station? And with my disability, how will it look like if something happens? So sometimes there's some fear, of course. But most disabled persons, especially, and I think with the advent of internet and a lot of this technology, WhatsApp, information these days are. So somehow when things are going wrong, so if it's not going wrong now, you go present yourself, to vote. First, you think before elections, before the actual elections, the fear of how the election look like. Will you be safe? You read it together with your impairments. Will you be safe? Will you be a burden to someone also who's helping you to go and vote? Those are the concerns and the fears that are there. Then when you reach the polling stations, are the polling areas accessible for you? Will you get someone to help you, to cast your votes, and if you manage and you come home, will you feel that your vote is safe and that election will go or will get concluded in a peaceful way, and the results will it lead to something? Those fears and concerns are always there. And then of course you come back, like in Kenya, election day is always a public holiday, and security agencies, elections, stakeholders encourage, go vote. Don't idle in the polling station. Go home and watch, from the comforts of your home, how the election. So then you come back home and then you get glued to the TV with the fear that, will something happen? And those are the fears that is in all of us, whether we have disability, whether we have no, disabilities. Personally, I voted in my rural home in northern Kenya, about 1,000 kilometers from Nairobi here. You can imagine how it looks like, with no tarmac road. It's a challenge. Sometimes if it rains, the roads are, some challenge here and there. But because voting is important to us, it is a way of exercising your political right. You feel obligated, you must vote so that you can have the right government. You can have, you make the right decision in the local governance structure. Yeah. So I think if we don't vote, as they say, if you don't vote, you vote in the wrong people. So you have to vote, and make a decision. So it's, I think challenges are there as I enumerated, in my statement, but it depends on, again, the nature of disability of someone.
Generally speaking, how would you characterize this election in August, this past election?
I think in Kenyan history, this is the best election. I will say that. The most peaceful election of all. Anxieties were there before. This election actually demonstrated to us that democracy in Kenya is coming off the edge, despite very tensed campaigns, you know, kind of looking a bit polarized because of the histories that we had before. Also, Kenyans were learning lessons. They say we should not go back to what happened to us in 2007 and few issues here and there of 2013 or something. So every cycle of election, if you look from 2007, there is a remarkable improvement. But this one is the best. We haven't heard of major issues. So as a country, this makes us very proud that democracy is prevailing. And we have to now further then strengthen our institutions, whether it is judiciary, remember, don't forget Kenya is among the very few countries in the world that nullified, the election of a president. And life was going on, you know. So I think somehow as a country, again, in the middle of many nations that are not that stable, whether it is political or whether it is, whatever, I think this election for us was the best. Well, it tells, that previous, because of the fears of the previous elections, some sort of voter apathy might be witnessed. But this election restores back some confidence. And then now we have to embark on campaigns, sensitizing people, So I think, I told you 2017, 13, there are some few issues here and there. Then people say, after all, if I vote, it was going to go like this. Why do I vote, And that's a very wrong approach. Yeah, it's a number of things. I think in almost all democracies in the world, if you get even about two-third voting, is a major thing. It's not in isolation only in Kenya, but that figure can be said a number of reasons. Some reasons, maybe some might find it difficult to travel in the up countries. You find most people who are working in Nairobi are voters in their rural areas. So there may other factors, factors like, if I vote, will my vote count? Factors like, will I get flexibility of going to our rural home and vote and come back? Factors like security, a number of issues, play out, but the major one is fear, let me say. No, no, that is the perceptions of many voters because we come from different communities. They tend to see one of their own, even whatever he front, as an important agenda because it's one of their own. But the margin that that it was won this time, it's in order because even Kenyan constitutions say one vote counts, 50% plus one. Even one vote count, 50% will. So I think whether there's a big margin, whether it's a small margin, provided it has surpassed 50 plus one. So when that shows how close that election is, and ending peacefully, and the transition of one government to the other, in a very peaceful manner. That should be the emphasis, as a country, that we're going somewhere. I think the court case, I think there's some, of course, whoever loses in a court has issues, but over the years we have seen Kenyan court also demonstrating and instilling some confidence. That's why people are now going to court. I think in this particular election, the number of cases that have gone to court, they say that from what we hear in the media, the lowest ever. That shows, the credibility of the election process. And then if people go to court, it means, the trust people have, in judiciary, going forward. So I think as a democracy, we are improving, and we are doing well. Yeah, yeah. There are agencies, like NCIC and other agencies, security apparatus, who have come up with guidelines and informations around what to say, what not to say, the consequences of what if you say going on. So I think I'm not very sure of that. I think relevant entities around here can make proper remarks around here insofar as whether they are arrest or whether they are court cases. Maybe they can respond to that. But I know efforts have been put in place. When Kenya, of course, that democracy prevails, that everybody's votes counts, you know, that is a country, of course, as a patriotic Kenya as I am, that other nations even look up to us. While we know the hate speech, the one that incite people, but for us, we have our own version of hate speech, as communities with disabilities, wrong terminologies, the way you are called. So some persons with disability find it a bit offensive if leaders or the societies might not call them with the right phrase. For example, in UK and in USA, disabled person is the right terminology. But in Kenya, people see that a bit offensive. They prefer persons with disabilities. So you find people calling those with disabilities other terms like cripple, you know, in Kiswahili, like kiwete, kipofu, meaning sounding so derogative, and it is offensive. And as organization, those are some of the things that we felt we should create awareness around so that people can feel also okay with how you find people getting into podiums in politics and say, we're going to include even cripples in our manifesto instead of saying persons with disabilities. And of course, they say it not out of malice or bad feeling, but it is the level of awareness that is a bit low. Those are our version of hate speech as persons with disabilities. Yes. Let me say something around there. I think because of a robust engagement and awareness conducted in the country, there are a number of persons with disabilities who contested in the last election. And for a record highest in this election, 5 members of parliament with disabilities were elected. Actually, one almost became even a governor of Nairobi. He's a member of parliament for 3 times and is a wheelchair user like me. That's a record highest, 5. Meaning now what it means is the society is trying to focus on what someone can contribute, not how you look like. So, awareness are picking up. So in both house now we have, +4, +9, you know, members of parliament with disabilities. That's a remarkable, good achievement, for us. And they formed an association called Kenya Parliamentarians with Disabilities. 2 weeks ago, we had a breakfast meeting with them to try to plan out, the legislative representation or oversight as their role in the context of disabilities. So I think tunaenda kidogo kidogo pahali we are fairly doing well. Yes, thank you.